In this episode,
Simon, who are they? Go on, name and shame.
No, I'm not going to name him, Shane.
How does the homeowner know that the installers did a bad job?
And that's how you get your $7,500. I think it should be a minimum requirement. It's crazy.
Anything that's saying they're a 17 kilowatt, 16 kilowatt is a lie.
It's the same machine. It's exactly the same machine. It's just been tweaked inside.
She's set it to 20, never ever got above 17.
I don't want to answer that.
hi and welcome to another episode of Homeowners Q&A. I'm your host Mars, and today's episode is a little bit different. We've gathered a number of real homeowner experiences involving subpar heat pump installations, stories shared with us through the Renewable Heating Hub forums, YouTube comments and direct messages. But our aim today isn't to point fingers, but to explore what went wrong so that homeowners can learn from these experiences. Joining me are Sean Hogan from Aventus Eco, James Clark from Elite Services Group, Patrick Wheeler from Vito Energy, Simon Wardle from Ultimate Renewable Supplies. Welcome everybody. Before we get started, we'd like to thank Egg for sponsoring this episode. Egg is on a mission to crack clean energy because, let's face it, switching to solar, batteries or EV charging shouldn't feel like solving a riddle. With 10 years of making the hard stuff feel easy, they design, install and support homes and businesses across the UK, turning clean energy into a no-brainer. Their goal? A future where every ray of sunshine powers a simpler, smarter choice. So thank you, Egg, for helping us all switch to the sunny side stress-free. Let's crack clean energy together. Right, so today's going to be a bit of a reading day for me because we have got quite a number of cases that I wanted to share with you guys, and by all means please feel free to answer as honestly and frankly as you want to, because I think that, as I said at the outset, this isn't to point fingers, but we do want to start educating people as to what constitutes something that's a good installation and a bad one. So I'm going to start off with a case that was posted on our forums. This has now had 53,000 views, over 80 pages of content and nearly 1,000 replies. So this homeowner, Ian, has spent 2 years trying to get a functional and efficient heat pump system. He received 3 quotes at the time, each of them recommending an 8 kilowatt system, and they were told by their chosen installer that only a 6 kilowatt unit was available at the time. This later changed to a 5 kilowatt Samsung heat pump, which the installer claimed would be sufficient, given that the heat losses all pointed to an 8 kilowatt system. So the installation began in July 2022. And there were several components that were missing, such as the flow sensor, thermostat, expansion vessel, and pressure relief valves, which were installed at a later point. The system only became operational a month later and suffered from errors during commissioning, including incorrectly positioned sensors. This homeowner, without getting on because this is such a big case, has been around the houses through MCS, NIC, RECC, Energy Savings Trust, and absolutely none of the bodies that are out there to actually try and resolve this problem have actually come to help him. And just to kind of wrap this up, his heat pump now costs 40% more than the gas boiler that it actually replaced. So the question that I have is, how can homeowners protect themselves when an installer proposes equipment changes after the quotation, particularly reductions in system sizing?
It's a contract. It's the same with anything. When you buy anything, it's a contract. If they change it, you have to sign the changing contract. It'd be the same if you bought a car and it wasn't what you paid for. That's the boring and short answer, I suppose.
So if somebody has had a quote for an 8 kilowatts, then they say a 6 and a 5, and they fit the 5, and the 5 doesn't work, they can then comfortably go back to the installer and say, listen, you were originally going to put in an 8, you put in a 5. Clearly, you've got to come back, remove this thing, and put in an 8. Is that fair, James?
I don't think it should even get to that point in the first place. The heat pump should cover the heat loss of the property. Sound terrible for saying this, but probably a little bit naive by the customers, allowing that to happen in the first place. It's saying, why we're going to a 5 when it clearly says an 8. Yeah, afterwards, same again, an corresponding email saying, if you are confident with this 5, then absolutely. But if you can't get to design temperatures, then you're responsible for, putting a different unit in. But obviously all through email.
There's no standardization in the specification of heat pumps, which seems utterly bonkers, that you can have one brand of heat pump that says it's a 17 kilowatt and it can only deliver 17 kilowatts when it's plus 7 degrees outside and you're only trying to get it to 35 degree flow temperature, and that's its designation as a model. And there are others that say they're a 5 but can actually give 6.5 when it's -3 outside. There's no standardization, and I think most installers don't know that, let alone homeowners. So I think until there's a forced standardization, some kind of chart that can be referred to that's indemnified by somebody, it is a bit of a minefield. But the installer should know that, and they should be guided by their manufacturer. In some cases, it might be called a 5, and actually it would be suitable for a 6 kilowatt house, or a 17 would not be suitable for anything more than a 13 kilowatt house. I think expecting the homeowner to know that when most installers don't might be a bit difficult, but the installer should know, and they're providing a contract saying we're going to make this work. And I've seen that with clients that we've taken on that have had bad installs before, the installer isn't held accountable by anybody. They've gone to RECC, they've gone to MCS, and they won't do anything about it. They're just saying, well, have they delivered what they said in the contract? Well, sort of. The physical bits are all there, but it's not working, and the house is cold, and my bills are high. And there doesn't seem to be anyone that will actually pick that up and deal with it. And I think the problem with that is that if they do, then the floodgates are going to open and they'll be overrun.
James, Patrick have really nailed this. It's a tiny bit naive by homeowner if 3 people have said you need an 8 kilowatt and they can only get a 5 kilowatt. What really annoys me in this industry is we've got several different manufacturers. Some of them are all the same units, as we know, and they'll call them all different things. So a 16 kilowatt can actually only do 12 on some can actually do 14 kilowatts, and at this -3 50-degree flow temp. We need to standardize it. In all the glossy brochures that's handed over to Mr. and Mrs. Miggins, it's a +7 at 35 degrees. We don't design to that in this country at all. It's meaningless. All we need to do is to make it easier for homeowners and for installers getting into this industry, everything should be at a -5. That covers most of the country, and say this heat pump. So when you pick up a heat pump and it's got 14 kilowatts, everyone knows that does 14 kilowatts at -5 at the 50-degree flow temp, or 55 because that's to regs now. That makes it really simple for homeowner to understand what they're getting.
So, Sean, both Simon and James have said that this homeowner is naive. I kind of take a little bit of exception to that, purely because, if a homeowner has got a heat loss calculation of 8, in the greater scheme of things, I think, as Patrick alluded to, that doesn't mean an awful lot in terms of those kind of numbers, given that, it operates at a certain power output at a certain ambient temperature outside. Do you think that the homeowner was naive?
Yes, I would still say the homeowner was naive, because I think if they were getting told they could only get a 5 kilowatt heat pump, heat loss was 8, they still went and got a second opinion, or went on the forum and asked for advice on there. Also, under the regulations, as an installer, you've got to provide your heat loss, and we provide each individual room, the radiator sizing or the underfloor heating sizing, and it shows you if that can meet the output of that energy loss. So he should have had that design, and it should have then been changed to a 5 kilowatt to see then what size of radiators would needed upgraded, or the underfloor heating, or extra insulation measures, so that 5 kilowatt heat pump would have worked. So he should have had that design and went over it.
Has the homeowner said that the house is cold? Was the heat loss correct, and therefore it's not warming up?
The house does not get to temperature. He's in Scotland on top of everything else, so it gets really, really cold. His biggest complaint is it's cold and super expensive to run.
It's interesting that MCS have recently changed the way that we do performance estimates, and they've standardized the coefficient of performance for all heat pumps delivering the same efficiency depending on temperature. And that's incorrect, by the way. I don't agree with what they've done there. But if they can do it with that, then they can definitely do it with output, because pretty much all heat pumps, if they're single phase, they can deliver the same amount of power at the top end, and they can modulate to the same amount of power at the bottom end. Anything that's saying they're 17 kilowatt or 16 kilowatt is a lie, unless it's 30 degrees outside and you're trying to heat your house. So standardizing that would be the best thing MCS could do. I guess it'd be MCS that would need to do it to help homeowners and installers.
We've teamed up with Egg, one of the UK's leading home energy providers, to give one lucky homeowner the chance to win a 6-panel solar installation worth £6,281. Perfect for a typical 3-bedroom house, this system can help you slash energy bills and cut your carbon footprint. The winner can also choose to upgrade by adding more panels or a battery, with flexible payment options available. This is your chance to future-proof your home, reduce grid reliance, and embrace cleaner, greener living, completely free thanks to Egg and Renewable Heating Hub. To enter, simply visit Renewable Heating Hub, link in the description. Terms and conditions apply. Don't miss out. Get your entry in now and start your solar journey sunny side up. Good luck.
I just want to make it clear to homeowners and everyone listening, it's always the heat pump that gets the blame. On this particular one where it's undersized, I know the Samsung pretty well. And I know an 8 kilowatt Samsung will do about 6.5 kilowatts at -3 at 45 degree flow temp. well, we design everything to 45 max. I know the 5 kilowatt will actually do probably 5.5 at -3. It's the same machine. It's exactly the same machine. It's just been tweaked inside. Don't think manufacturers make multiples of. It will be up to roughly from 4 to 8 or 10 kilowatts. They're the same machine. They've just been ramped down inside. If this was designed properly and we looked at the pipework, I bet I could get that 5 kilowatt to work to at least probably 0. So we're probably talking a couple of weeks of the year where we're not going to get that house to 21 degrees. That 8 kilowatt they've picked, they would have come out with a heat loss around probably 6.5 kilowatts. 6 kilowatts. That 5 ain't far off pushing what that can do anyway. To me, it's we've got to look a little bit further than just going the heat pump's undersized. I think if one of us that are on this podcast now went and go and had a look at that system, I bet we'd find a multitude of sins, right, which we could cherry pick off and make that heat pump work to a degree.
But Simon's absolutely right. If they've fucked up there, they've probably fucked up loads of other places. So they need someone who knows what they're doing to swoop in. And unfortunately, they're going to be throwing good money after bad, because they'll now need to find someone that does know what they're doing to go and fix it, which is really frustrating. And I'm sure most of us have been in the situation where you go to someone who had really good intentions as a homeowner of decarbonising their home and fitting a heat pump, and they found someone that they trusted, and that engineer might have even thought they knew what they were doing, and it's kind of fallen apart. Then that trust disappears, and then they have to pay someone like us to go in and fix it. And then you're saying to them, well, really, it's going to cost a couple of grand. We can make it a lot better. We might be able to actually make it that your running costs are where you wanted and your comfort is where you wanted, but we've got to rip out all of these pumps. We've got to get rid of the buffer or the glycol, or we've got to put in a proper controller rather than a hive. And they're saying, well, hold on, I've already paid for this project. It's already done. It's completed. I've got all of the bits. It cost me 10 grand. I don't want to pay you 2 grand to make it good, and they're not going to trust that we'll know what we're doing. It is a tough position, and really that's the only solution at this stage. They need someone that knows what they're doing to come in, reassess it. They're going to charge them a few £100 for an audit, and then they can make a recommendation on what they need to do, and that'll start again probably from a heat loss, a proper heat loss, a room by room, working out if the emitters are sized right, if the pipes are sized right, if the controls are right, and if the heat pump's right. And unfortunately, at this stage, if they can't force the original installer to do that, then they're going to be in a position where they're going to have to pay someone else.
I think what you've raised there, Patrick, is spot on. And I think that the other drawback and big failure here has been the inaction of, in this case, the MCS, NIC, and RECC, because this homeowner, on our advice, we told him just pound all of these bodies, which he did. And he says that the actual installer that did this has been scrapped off the NIC accreditation twice since the complaints that, they've scrapped him, they've brought him back on, they've scrapped him again. Simon, why is it that these bodies continue to fail homeowners despite them being there? What is their purpose?
There isn't a purpose for them. They're just a fruit machine. They just want the money.
I'm glad you said it, Simon, instead of me for once.
Yeah, no, but it's true, Patrick. It's just that they do bugger all, and they get all this money, and all of us here. When something goes wrong, and if it's one of ours, we send out our own engineers before sending out a manufacturer. We're not all perfect. Well, there'll be bumps in the road that we do, but that's what we do. We go back and we fix what we may have got wrong. What Patrick alluded to before, homeowners need to be aware that if something goes wrong with your heat pump, it isn't going to be cheap like a boiler to fix. First of all, engineers need to go out and spend half a day assessing the system. They don't come cheap. So you're talking £200-300 just to send someone out to assess it, then come back and then work on it. So it's never going to be a quick fix. So as Patrick alluded to, generally what we're doing is ripping out pump packs, extra pumps, buffers, taking out glycol. And it breaks the homeowners up when they've paid 20 grand for a system, 15 grand for a system, and you're sat there going, we need to take all of this out. And it's going to be the best part and repipe, and it's going to be the best part of £1,500 to £2,000 to put the system right, when they've already paid £10,000 to £20,000 for that system.
Are you thinking about getting a heat pump? Then don't get caught out by a bad installation. Bodge Buster is your essential guide to asking the right questions and spotting red flags before it's too late. Written from real homeowner experience, this book gives you the knowledge to avoid costly mistakes and make informed decisions. Get Bodge Buster today in print or for Kindle, link in the description. We're going to change gears now. We're going to start talking a little bit about buffer tanks, our favorite subject. and it was inevitable that we had to actually cover this. So we've had a lot of homeowners that have had heat pumps now for 3 or 4 years, and they've started to get some niggles with those. They've obviously raised these concerns with their installer. The installer then comes back to them and says, well, you told us not to put the buffer tank in. Your warranty is now no longer valid. Simon, is this something that you guys are seeing? Is it fair that you can install a heat pump and then be penalized on your warranty for not having a buffer tank?
There's probably only 1 or 2 manufacturers left in the industry that say you've got to fit a buffer. And
who are they, Simon? Who are they? Go on, name and shame.
No, I'm not going to name them, Shane. I won't use them. I'm not a lover of buffers, but it's them manufacturers that don't understand how open volume works for their heat pump. There's one big manufacturer that in the early days, and I'll name them actually because they have changed. So it was Samsung who said you had to have a buffer. This was going back to early 2010, 11. They just manufacturers wanted, and they knew very little about the heat pump themselves and our wet circuits, and they wanted their stop-start. So all the heat pump does is thinks the buffer is the house. That's all it's worried about. It's on its own Scalextrics track. All it's designed to do is go and heat that buffer. So when Mr. and Mrs. Miggins are playing with their TRVs and opening them, shutting them, or closing down their underfloor heating, that heat pump had that volume there, 1 to do defrost, and 2 to keep it happy and ticking over. So no manufacturer, first of all they request in their manufacturer's manual is minimum volume in that system. Heat pumps, more water it's got to play with, the happier it is. But what they're all manufacturers now are covering in their books will say anything from really up to 10 kilowatts, they want 30 litres of open volume, and then it's generally around 60 litres from 10 to 16 kilowatt. We try to aim for a minimum of 150 litres of open volume, and the more the better. And what we'll do is we'll put lock shields on certain radiators. We will cherry pick off some actuators and make sure we got that minimum system volume there. In an ideal world, open loop would be no control in the house whatsoever, but we'd scare half of the installers to death that have all been told to microzone everywhere. Homeowners used to having full control, even down to a closet. We're going out there and saying to everyone, no control, no stats, no TRVs, no actuators, and they'd look at us like we've got 2 heads. That's true open loop. So we do partial open loop where it gives that homeowner control in bedrooms, partial control in living areas, but bathrooms, hallways, no control whatsoever. And we make sure that's open. Because what's really important is let's take a 16 kilowatt heat pump. Most manufacturers will say that can modulate down to 25%. So that's just say that 16 kilowatt heat pump can come down to 5 kilowatts. What we want to do is make sure there's 5 kilowatts open around the house. So if everything is shut down, we're not short cycling and turning on and off that heat pump. And that's what the buffer, getting back to your question, that's what the buffer is designed to do. If the homeowner knows best and they've Googled it and they want full control, we advise them that it's going to cost slightly more to run. They will need a buffer, and they can have their buffer and have their control. But we explain to them their running cost will go up for that very reason. If you want to run just your heat pump in a living room and that living room needs 1 kilowatt and your heat pump can only modulate down to 5 kilowatts, then it's going to cycle and it's going to cost you turning that on and off, wear and tear, and it's going to cost you more to run as well.
Simon was talking about the open loop different thermostats. The job we were at yesterday fitting solar PV, we are going today to look at the heat pump, and just a quick 5-minute look last night, the open plan living kitchen dining area that had 3 thermostats for the underfloor heating in the one room, and the room next door so the customer was complaining about high energy bills. And then when I went into the next room where the mum and dad live, when the house was done up 5 years ago and the heat pump was installed, it was decided that that area of the house didn't need any heating. So there's basically a wooden door to another living room that has no heat source emitters at all, and then another utility room. So she's got 1 thermostat in that other room. And I says, what temperature does your mum and dad set that to? She's set it to 20, never ever got above 17. And there's one of the main reasons why your energy bills are so high, because you've got all these different thermostats. You've got a room here that's totally with a massive heat loss next door, stealing all the heat, and it's just burning electricity.
If manufacturers could just give us a bloody heat pump that could control 2 PWM pumps, buffers doesn't cause extra running costs. It's trying to balance up both sides of the system. What we've got is I always say it's the analogy of a broken watch. It's going to be right twice a day. We've got a PWM in the heat pump now. Most of them all got built-in pumps, modulating pumps. So we've got a pump that's moving one side of our Scalextric's track, and we've got a fixed speed pump the other side. If we could make it really simple for installers, these guys here know how to balance a system, but let's be honest, in boiler world, most installers don't balance a system. They just open up the lock shields, open up the TRVs, all the rads get off, and then they bugger off out the door. So, but you can't do that in heat pump world. So if manufacturers could give us the tools to do the job, then fitting a buffer immaterial. It's an extra £500, £600 to an end user, and they've got to find space to put this 50-litre extra tank. We could have clever heat pumps that could control both sides of the pumps. It would automatically balance the system and won't create so much distortion through that buffer vessel.
If you're adding a buffer and an extra pump, you are going to the realms of about 500 quid. I think you can do a lot of damage with 500 quid with increasing the pipe size correctly around the house. So it's just getting to the root cause. I completely understand that you can deliver a system efficiently with a buffer if you equalize the primary and the secondary side, absolutely. But I think it's tackling the root problem head on and get this distribution properly around the house. That's the main issue.
This homeowner transitioned from an oil boiler to a Zubadan air source heat pump paired with underfloor heating throughout the house. Since the installation, their electricity usage has quadrupled, sparking anxiety and confusion about the system efficiency and setup. Now, previously, their oil boiler was set to run on a time schedule with setback temperatures, and they've now kept the heat pump running continuously, only using slight setback temperatures per room. Now, this is where it gets a bit crazy. So they're concerned that the installer left the original flow temperature to 55 degrees centigrade, which they then complained about, and the installer came back and dropped that to 50 degrees centigrade. So, Sean, we advised them to actually switch over to weather compensation, which they did, and the system is running far better and far cheaper. Why is it that installers are still leaving systems set at set points of low temperatures?
I think there's a lot of installers out there that are designing at 50, 55 because they can still, basically they can fit less radiators and got less cost to them for the system because it's running at a higher flow temperature, but they might still be charging the full amount as of what a good installer might be charging, and they're installing bigger radiators and such. Or basically they might just not know, or they're not confident in their design.
Boilers just get hot and work and the customer's happy and you don't go back if it's going to explode. So it's just that we're trained to do that. But what they're probably doing is they've got 50 degrees coming out of the heat pump. It's then going into another pump on the blending pack and blending it back down. So it's like using the accelerator and the brake at the same time.
Let's not beat around the bush. Installers ain't been doing bloody weather comp on boilers for 10 years anyway. So why are they going to do it on a heat pump? We kind of say to homeowners and give them a bit of a guide, and every 1 degree you can dial down on the heat pump is going to save you 2.5–3% running cost per year. So if you're running a heat pump on an average of 40 degrees, or you're going to run it at 55 degrees, well, there you go. There's about 40% running cost straight away. If they weren't doing it in boiler world on weather comp, why the hell are they going to do it in heat pump world?
Well, the reason why they won't be doing it, we should be doing it in a heat pump world, is because electricity is really high and gas is really cheap, and to get the efficiency out and stuff like that, so it's going to cost you a heck of a lot more not taking that approach. I mean, when people email in or kind of them start them conversations where they're saying, my electric price is quadrupled, you're like, well, just wait a minute, what's your oil price done and what's your energy price done that way? Because over what's the heating bill gone to? But we could negate probably half of these podcasts and half of these problems going forward if we just metered our and monitored our heat pumps. Every heat pump should be dialed back into Ofgem or MCS or something like that. And unfortunately, Matt, as you won't have a podcast,
That's okay.
We just
find something else to do.
Everybody is liable, and that's it. If there's a problem, MCS or Ofgem or whoever goes down and say, well, you've got all your windows open, that's your problem, not the installation. But if there is a problem, it's we've got to be accountable. The minimum SCOP levels, it should be on weather compensation, all of these things that should just be metered and monitored straight away. And that's how you get your $7,500. I think it should be a minimum requirement. It's crazy.
James is absolutely spot on. When homeowner gets a heat pump, they'll generally maybe have a car charger as well. They forget all about their gas bill and they blame the heat pump. They get their first electricity bill and they may have had it installed in sort of like September, October time, where them 3 or 4 months are going to be your most expensive time of the year. My electric bill was 250. I've got an 8 kilowatt air source heat pump on a 20-year-old barn conversion. My electricity bill was £250 in December, but that isn't all heat pump. That's the house as well. You're using more lights. Everyone goes back and they forget about to deduct the gas bill from that they haven't got any more either. Last month, my gas bill, my electric bill, was £55. They need to take this over a 12-month. But James is right. If all installers, to make it really crystal clear, fitted an RCD with a meter on there so you could measure exactly what the heat pump's doing, it'll probably stop a lot of arguments when that homeowner's ringing installer to say this thing's costing me a fortune. But
Simon, straight back to you. So there's been a lot of cases where people have had kind of non-branded heat pumps. There's one homeowner, I think he's had this one for 8 or 9 years, and one of the components failed, and it's impossible for them to now find a replacement component for that. Is it a recommendation then to homeowners to not put in brands they've never heard of before? Is it just a far safer bet to stay with the big brands that are out there to avoid these kind of issues going long term? Because it's highly unlikely that a Vaillant or a Mitsubishi is going to run out of spares.
really, the simple answer to that is yes. That unbranded heat pump was probably made by one of the big boys anyway, so there probably is spares that can find for that, but it makes it really difficult for people on this podcast and installers. If Mr. and Mrs. Miggins rings you up and says, I've got no name or data badge on a heat pump, can you find me a spare? We're all busy fools at the minute, and it's kind of one of them ones where you go, I'll send an engineer to have a look, but they're not willing to pay the £300 for the engineer to go around there and spend the time and try and identify it. So we say to all homeowners, because they're all going out there and getting 3 to 5 quotes, is pick a brand that is going to be around for the next 10, 15 years. Make sure that manufacturer's there, because you are going to need spares at some point. So they always say, you buy cheap, you buy twice. So I wouldn't be buying an unbranded heat pump where you didn't know who the manufacturer was.
It's the same thing with anything, isn't it? If you buy an unbranded mixer shower, at some point that cartridge is going to go wrong, and and you won't be able to find a replacement for that. You just wouldn't do it unless it's really, really, really cheap, or you inherited it, I suppose. Then you've got to expect that cutting corners is going to have ramifications.
And also, I think it'd be good to the homeowners to look at warranty. That unbranded heat pump, what warranty covers it? And is it a manufacturer warranty, or is it an installer warranty? And that's something else to look at, because with your Vaillants and your Samsungs, they'll tell you exactly what the warranty is, and fit this cylinder with it, you get an extra warranty, blah, 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 that kind of thing. So I think you need to do your due diligence.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why, it's probably the same as you guys, Patrick, and everyone, is that the heat pumps that we choose, and it's kind of the sales pitch. When you go there, you go, I go to big brand manufacturers because, heaven forbid, I go pop, or I'm living in Barbados somewhere or something like that, the warranty is with the manufacturer. I don't know the particular brands, but I've heard it from customers saying, I can't get my warranty because my installer's gone kaput. Kind of tying that warranty in with the installer. I'm going, your warranty is with Vaillant or Dakin or Ideal, that's with you guys. So it gives them a reassurance that a big, massive brand is behind their installation.
There was an installer up here in Scotland that was buying heat pumps by the container load for eco jobs, and they were unbranded and they were putting their own company name on them. I was under the understanding any heat pump that was fitted under MCS had to have the MCS registered code on the database. So that's another thing for a customer. They should check that, because when we do a quote for Home Energy Scotland, they ask for the certain code to say that it's registered with MCS on their database and it's approved to be installed. So that could be another thing the homeowner should look at. Get the manufacturer's name, model number, put it into the MCS website and actually see if it's registered and being able to be allowed to be fitted under any scheme.
Yeah, you can buy heat pumps in from China at sort of 700-800 quid, can't you? And it will technically do the job, but there's just no backup whatsoever. There was a boiler installation company about a decade ago that was buying known boilers, but buying them without a warranty. So they were shipping them in really, really cheap and then offering their own warranty of 12 years. And they racked up loads and loads and loads, sold loads and loads and loads, and then just disappeared. So the warranty wasn't worth anything at all. I guess you would want to check that if there's a warranty on anything at all, the period of the warranty, that company should have been in existence for at least that amount of time for it to be worth a jot.
Are you new to heat pumps and feeling lost? Then from zero to Heat Pump Hero helps you understand, operate, and optimize your system. No jargon, just simple practical advice from one homeowner to another. Take control of your heating and save energy. Get your copy now, link in the description. So earlier this year, to try and negate some of the absolutely horrific installations that are going on out there, we created our own kind of installation network where we're trying to connect homeowners with the highest quality installers that are actually out there. But that doesn't help the homeowners, of which there are just so many, when they've already had that system installed. And we're now beginning to see what I call dead-end scenarios, where the credible installers just don't want to go out and touch somebody else's work, because as soon as they do, they feel like they're liable for that. And then the original installer will go, well, so-and-so Patrick has come and he's fiddled with it. He's the one that's actually responsible for this now. So Patrick, how do we get around this whole dead-end scenario of getting the best installers out there to try and rectify some of these really awful installs?
There aren't enough installers that are bad at the moment, let alone installers that are good. We have a huge amount of money and investment and demand being put in from government and high level, and all of the responsibilities being put onto people that are fitting boilers, fitting bathrooms, and now being told you have to know the exact air permeability of a type of brick. So there's already a lot of responsibility on installers without telling them that they've got to go and fix other people's problems. But the answer really is training. You need more people entering the industry, more people being trained to understand the complexities of it. And luckily, we've got a lot of tools now that are making design a lot easier. There's an enormous amount of tech innovation that's coming in to help. And I'm not one for, solutions where we don't have problems, but we do have problems in specifying and designing heating systems generally, but in particular low temperature ones. So the tech, I think, is coming in, the investment and the demand and the growth is there. And really, we need to fundamentally have a government massive drive to bringing more people in, training more people properly, rather than very fast track courses that give you a BPEC or an LCL in understanding what a heat pump is and why you do pipe sizing. We need much, much, much more training. And it's not a quick fix. We're going to be ages before we've got people that know how to go and make things right. And that's not going to help those people that have had a heat pump installed to a system that's not suitable, or an unsuitable heat pump that's been fitted. That's a really tough one to solve, and it's just going to take time.
Sean, would you go and rectify somebody's system?
Yeah, we do, but I find that a difficult one today after this podcast. That's what we are going to do. We're going to go and rectify a system, but I kind of base it on the customer and how bad it is. See if it's really bad and it's like ripping up floors and it's a remedial, I would probably shy away from it. If it's easy enough, it's an underfloor heating system, we're taking out some extra pumps, we're trying to make it a bit more open zone, teach the customer how to use the controls, put it on full weather compensation, then fine, we'll do that. I don't mind doing that. We did a couple there last week's services on Valiant. The list was about 15 items long on each heat pump. What was wrong? Magnetic filter was fitted so tight to the floor and against the wall, can't be serviced, you can't open it up. I did a full list, gave it to the customer, and I said, put that back to your installer. And their attitude was, we don't want them back in the house, we don't want that installer back. Everybody's had problems with them, blah, blah, blah. And I says, well, look, send them the report. I says, you can also go to AMCS. But they've now come back to me and asked me for a price to fix it. And I'm thinking, do I want the hassle of doing that one job where there isn't a lot of money in it, but it's a lot of hassle, and then the next neighbour or somebody else goes, can you do mine, can you do mine, you do mine, and I'm just spending loads of time being busy, but not making a lot of money fixing somebody else's work.
Simon, we've had a question from YouTube from a gentleman called Patrick Flatley, and he asks, what do you think of Aira's 15-year comfort guarantee?
It can only be a good thing for the industry. Or to be fair, it'll give manufacturers a bit of a kick up the bum to increase theirs. If you look at Aira's T's and C's, it's probably not worth the paper it's written on. So that's there's a lot of get out clauses there. But look, a 15-year warranty is, we're going back to Boiler World when it first started at 5 years, went to 7 years, 15 years, 20 years, and I used to work for Kingspan many years ago when unvented cylinders used to start off with a 5-year, then went to 10 years, 15 years. Now we've got lifetime guarantees. If you don't get that serviced after 12 months, doesn't matter. You could have a lifetime guarantee. The warranty's gone.
This homeowner has been very frustrated because they've had a heat pump system put in, and they can't get access to any of their performance data. So that includes the COP, the running costs, etc. When they went back to the installer said, well, that's fine. You can just ring me every time you want that information. I'll sign into your actual system and I'll send that information through to you. Should homeowners be given full access to this data via the control panel? And why is it that so many of these features are actually hidden behind kind of password protected areas?
I think they should. The customer's paying for the equipment. They're paying for the full service. They own it at the end of the day. As you know, we fit mostly variants. And when you fit Valiant Connect, you get the full system on your phone. You get to see its performance day by day, week by week in your full year. That also gives the customer a bit more information to say, is this running efficiently or not? Is there a reason why these bills are high? And they can look at the performance data of it and then go back to the installer instead of just being a heat pump interface stuck away in a cupboard somewhere, as most guys are just going, set that and forget and don't call me again, because I think a lot of that's going on as well. So definitely, I think the customer should be able to have access to all the information.
But it's important to say that not all of the efficiency data from heat pumps is equal or even. It's some of them, well, actually almost none of them have got an ultrasonic sensor in there, so they're kind of taking a bit of a stab in the dark at the efficiency. It's a good indicator, and it's certainly better than nothing. The Valent one we find is pretty good. It's certainly nowhere near as good as the Open Energy Monitor if you had a proper system, but that adds 500 to 600 quid to the job. So it's very rare that a customer wants to go for that upgrade, because a lot of customers might be looking at homeowners might be looking at their controller, going up to the little interface and tapping it in and going, oh, that's really good, my SCOP's at 6. It might be 4, might be 5, might be 6, but it does give an indicator. It's something at least. So yeah, I think the homeowner, the person that's responsible for it and has paid for it, should have something, but do take it with a bit of a pinch of salt. Don't be calling your installer if it says that it's a SCOP of 3.5 and you were promised a 4, because it's not perfect.
Patrick's hit it on the head, really. Is that, look, most customers don't know what SCOP or COP is. They'll know from their energy bill. When that pops in every month, they know if it's running good or not. If a homeowner is hung up on SCOPs and COPs and SCOP chasing and all the rest, then they'd have done a bit of education already and know you can have energy monitors put on there, and if they want to pay an extra £1,000 to have all these widgets put on to tell them what the SCOPs are, they can have that from the off. Most decent installers will offer that up front if they want that. If they just want a basic system, it doesn't need to have. But we done a podcast the other month, Mars, and all the new controllers coming through in the next, I think, 6 to 12 months are going to have this all on a standard and become a lot more homeowner friendly, instead of coming up with all these code errors and symbols that mean nothing to homeowners.
I've got a bit of a bugbear with SCOP being the only figure that anyone looks at, and it's the one that we're told that has to be the benchmark. It's the one that people use for bragging rights. It's an important measure. It's not the most important measure. The most important one is, are your running costs what you were told they were going to be per year? Yes, great, tick. And is the home comfortable in all of the areas that you want it to be comfortable? Yes, tick. You could have a very high SCOP, but also way over the top running costs throughout the year. You can trick your SCOP if you want to. You can run it in May and still have the heating trickling through at 35 degrees, and your overall SCOP's going to look great. But your running costs are going to be higher, and you're wasting energy when you don't need to be. So it's a good figure, and it's a good one for people to get a start on having a look at costing and comfort, but it's not the be all and end all.
This is the last case we're going to discuss today, and this was an incredibly long saga. We helped this homeowner out big time, and we can't name the actual manufacturer because of legal stuff that's happened. But essentially, what had actually transpired is that the homeowner had his heat pump put in, and the heat pump would go into a defrost cycle every 30 minutes. And that defrost cycle would last for 15 minutes. So he was essentially getting 15 minutes of heating out of every half hour. They obviously complained to the installer. The installation wasn't fantastic. The manufacturer actually came out to investigate the case. And their solution for it was to actually activate the backup heater every time the temperature dropped below 3 degrees centigrade, +3. So it made the system exceptionally expensive to run. And eventually the manufacturer did concede that was actually a fault with the heat pump, but this took months and months and months of going backwards and forwards. So what accountability should manufacturers bear when there's a clear mismatch between performance and in-field results, Simon?
I don't think if they've come back and admitted that there was a fault with the heat pump, then you would have thought they would have covered the running costs, the extra running costs on what the MTN performance certificate said it was going to be. As Patrick said, they would have known their running costs over a year. If that had spiked because of that reason, then they should be picking up the tab for that. Open and shut case, really.
But isn't it a bit outrageous that their solution was to come and activate the backup heater when the temperature dropped below 3 degrees, positive 3 degrees centigrade? I mean, I find that ridiculous.
It's down to two things there. It's either system volume wasn't correct, but you would have thought in the midst of winter while they're running this, all their TRVs and everything would have been open. But again, I'd have looked at the simple control philosophy. Is it zoned everywhere? Is there zoned upstairs and downstairs? Are they running boiler type valves, not full flow valves? Was filters blocked? I imagine they would have done all that simple stuff to check. Yeah, if everything was open and it couldn't defrost itself, then it clearly points back to the heat pump.
I mean, I don't know the situation. I don't know the manufacturer that was involved. But it sounds like the manufacturer thought that the heat pump was undersized or that there was a lack of volume. That's what I would think if I was the manufacturer in that situation. If the heat pump goes to defrost more than you expect, in most cases, that's because it doesn't have enough water in the radiators to recycle back into the heat pump to defrost it, or the heat pump's so undersized that it can't catch up with itself and it can never put enough energy into the building to then take out again. I'm not trying to defend someone in a situation I don't know, but it does sound as if the manufacturer was probably doing the right thing or following their flowchart in the way that they should. And in most cases, they would have got to the point that the installer admits that they've got the heat loss wrong or the house is a bit different to what they expected. But it sounds like the manufacturer has eventually done the right thing. It's just taken a bit of a long time. And unfortunately, that kind of complexity will lead into the negativity that we hear about and we read about in the newspapers, because it can be really complicated.
To add on to what Patrick was saying there as well, it's like, if you've got an engineer from a manufacturer going down, how far do they go? Are they going to go through every bedroom and look at the radiators and stuff? They're interested in the unit outside, and they've got another 6 units to see that day. It's like, how far do they look at all of the system design when they're having a look at a fault? So I do agree with Patrick of the right steps that they've kind of taken, and it leads to the point where I do empathise. Don't agree, but do empathise with manufacturers where they would want to maybe put a buffer in, because they go, at least we know, straight black and white, if it's a unit fault. When if it goes to open loop, then the manufacturer is taking on that system design, and is that system design, impairing our unit? Is our unit faulty or whatever? It gets a bit more complicated when you're opening it up to the system.
A lot of the manufacturers that we use are European brands. In Europe, they very often don't have just a heat pump. They very often have some kind of hybrid or electric backup, and we very rarely do that in the UK. So a lot of the data and the training that the manufacturers will have is now new for England, and especially when we're getting really good at heat losses and trying to specify the exact right heat pump so that it's not oversized and it's going to be more efficient. There's more responsibility on the installer to make sure that they're doing the right thing. And a buffer and an oversized heat pump will be less efficient, but it's also going to have fewer callbacks, or a lower percentage chance of callbacks because of long defrost or being undersized or not getting the house warm enough. And that's an additional complexity that the engineers now have as their responsibility to deliver that for their customers.
Sean, at what point does the manufacturer, using this case as an example, at what point do they have the onus of them actually picking up the phone and phoning the installer and saying, look, you guys have completely royally botched this. This has been poorly designed. You need to come back here and fix it, as opposed to the actual manufacturer themselves trying to sift through this and actually try and pick up the pieces and solve it for themselves?
It's a hard one to answer. Like, how does the homeowner know who's at fault? How does the homeowner know that the installers did a bad job without the manufacturer saying, well, it's the installer, or the installer turning around and says, well, it's the manufacturer, and then the homeowner stuck in the middle, still paying high energy costs? It's a bit of a difficult one to answer. And I guess on that case, it just had to play out, and the manufacturer found the fault, obviously. I'd imagine, as you said, Mars, the install itself was probably faults with it, regardless.
Lots of installers are trying to do a really good job by specifying exactly the right heat pump for exactly the right heat load, so it's not oversized. And we found this as well with our own internal work, where we're trying to do such a good job of specifying it exactly right, and we're not leaving much margin for error, that installers that go in and fit a massively oversized heat pump with a buffer are probably getting away with callbacks, but it won't be as efficient, their running costs will be slightly more, but they're masking over a load more problems in the same way that the gas boiler industry has been. You put in a 40 kilowatt combi, it's going to work. The house is going to get hot. The running costs are way over by percentage of difference what it would be for a really well optimized gas boiler, but gas was really cheap and it didn't really matter. Now we're seeing that gulf is much, much bigger with heat pumps, so it's illustrated. But you're more likely to get a callback from a customer who's cold than you are from a customer who's got a 20% difference in the running cost of their heat pump. So I do feel sometimes that we're a little bit, because we're trying to push the boundaries and get the best efficiency and optimize our heat pumps, we, as the double-edged sword of that, we're then beholden to more scrutiny because we're right on that edge of trying to make things as good as they can be.
You wouldn't believe the amount of conversations I have with customers questioning the size of the heat pump I'm putting in comparison to other quotes that they've got. Why are you putting a 6 in when all the others have said 8, 10? You're like,
and I've got a 30 kilowatt boiler.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't really know, because we're heat lossing with the same set of rules or guidelines. So I really don't understand how it's twice the heat loss sometimes, unless they've like completely missed the wall. But yeah, you won't believe this, the conversations I have a customer saying, really questioning me why I'm putting a smaller one in when my paperwork, I will reiterate, when my paperwork aligned with, the heat pump that I'm putting in.
If you've got any questions about heat pumps, then you need to join the Renewable Heating Hub forums. You can connect with other homeowners, share experiences, and get advice on heat pumps and renewables. Sign up today and be a part of the conversation. Link in the description. So that's it for this episode of Homeowners Q&A. A massive thank you to our panel, Patrick, Simon, James, and Sean, for their insights, and a heartfelt thanks to all the homeowners who shared their stories. And a big thank you once again to Egg for sponsoring this episode. To find out more about their home energy solutions, head over to crackingenergy.com. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And if you've got a heat pump horror story of your own, we're always listening and here to help you. And before you go, don't forget to enter our epic giveaway. You could win a 6-panel solar installation for your home thanks to Egg. Head over to renewableheatinghub.co.uk to enter. Until next time, stay warm, stay green, stay tuned. Goodbye.
We couldn't afford the neon, Patrick.
I think the overhead lights were making it look like I'm thinning on top.
I don't. Well,
it's good for the industry. It's that they've taken that for the. I don't want to answer that.
I will be in Barbados. Then.
That's all a heat pump is in reverse. Is a fridge back to front. So I'm digressing a little bit, but I'll let Patrick was putting his hand up, so I'll let Patrick have a go.